Our scripture text today comes from Matthew 8, verses 18 through 27, and I'll be reading from the New Revised Standard Version. Now, when Jesus saw great crowds around him, he gave orders to go over to the other side. A scribe then approached and said, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." And Jesus said to him, "Foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." Another of his disciples said to him, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father." But Jesus said to him, "Follow me, and let the dead bury their own dead." And when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. A windstorm arose on the sea, so great that the boat was being swamped by the waves, but he was asleep. And they went and woke him, saying, "Lord, save us, we are perishing." And he said to them, "Why are you afraid, you of little faith?" And then he got up and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a dead calm. They were amazed, saying, "What sort of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him?" And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I was lucky enough, I believe it was 7 or 8 years ago, to have the trip of a lifetime when I was on sabbatical. And I've talked about this before enough that you're probably saying, yeah, we know about all your trips and things like that. But it was important enough to me that I'm still reflecting upon it. And part of that was I was able to go to Rome, and I had wanted my whole life to be able to go. And finally I was able to go and to experience all of that. And part of that trip was I wanted to go to the town of Assisi in Italy. And the reason that I wanted to go is I've always been an admirer of St. Francis of Assisi. And in his life, there's sort of an exuberance of giving up in order to find the fullness of God, is maybe the best way to describe what I like about St. Francis. And so I wanted to go to Assisi, and I was looking for a way to go. And I found this bus trip that went from Rome to Assisi and saw Assisi and come back in a day. And I thought, well, that's just right for me. That's what I want. And so we went and caught the bus early in the morning. When we stopped at a little medieval village and a place for lunch, and then made it to Assisi, and then came back. It was everything I hoped it would be. On the way up there, I sat next to a man who was from the Philippines. And he was, like me, had always wanted to go to Rome. He was very much a devout Roman Catholic, and so a part of his faith was he wanted to visit the headquarters of his church. He wanted to go to Rome. But he explained to me that his job in the Philippines was he was a government official, and his job was to head up the coordination of the Philippine government in response to climate change. So he was a high-ranking person in the Philippine government, and his job was to help them figure out what they needed to do in response to climate change. And so I heard him talk about what he did and explain all of that, and I was fascinated by all of that and fascinated by his life. And I told him, I said, maybe you in the Philippines, or I said, we in the United States, in many parts of the United States, have a luxury that you don't. And the Philippines, as you know, is an island nation made up of 7,600 islands. So there's a lot of beachfront in the Philippines. And they have, I told him, I said, we have a luxury in the middle part of the United States that maybe you don't. Here in the middle of the United States, most of us don't spend a lot of time on a beach, and so we don't necessarily see firsthand the effects of climate change in a way that he was dealing with day by day in his country. And I said, we have a luxury you don't have. We often, I think, as human beings, we live in an out of sight, out of mind kind of existence, which is natural. I mean, that's just how we are. We can't know about every need of the world. We don't see every need of the world. And so we can't respond to every need of the world. We only live in our own little corners, and that's naturally. I know that there are people in this world struggling with many things, but because I don't see it, I just don't know about it. I don't think about it. I don't respond to it. That's just part of being a human being, I think. I know that there are people dying in hospice wards and struggling in deep need. But I don't know about them. I don't know their lives. I don't know their situation. So I don't think about it. It's just not a part of my life. There's so many needs in the world that are that way. We just don't know about them. We don't see them. We don't know about them. And I think sometimes that we're that way with like that man I met in the Philippines. Like we don't live that existence. We think, oh yeah, they're dealing with that, but we're here. And so we don't think about it. We don't know about it. But I wonder if maybe in a way we're all in the same boat. I remember a few flights when I lived in Western New York into the Buffalo airport that were a little rocky. The winds come in off of Lake Erie and can be pretty intense, and sometimes flying in on a plane into the airport there can be a little rocky experience. And there was one time I remember I was coming in back home to Buffalo, and we were coming in over Lake Erie, and the plane was moving in ways that I had never experienced. I mean, it seemed like we were going this way and that way, and it just seemed like the plane was all over the place, and it was the rockiest flight I've ever experienced. Now, I think maybe for the pilots, I don't know. I imagine for the pilots, it was another day's work, and they had dealt with situations like that before, and it wasn't as intense for them as it was for us. They're professionals, and they knew what they were doing. But for those of us in the plane, I remember it was a little rocky, and it was the only time in my life I'd ever reached out and grabbed the seat in front of me. We were tossed about so much. Well, came in, we landed, and sure enough, we're going this way and that way, but the plane landed just fine, and we were safe. The people on the plane clapped when we landed. They were so happy to make it there. And the thing that I thought about, as I've thought about that flight was we were all in that together. Now, every single person in that plane was a stranger to me. I was flying on my own, and every type of person was probably on that plane. Now, I realize very poor people are usually not on plane flights just because they can't afford it, but otherwise, you had a broad section of humanity, every type of race and background and creed and color. I mean, and I'm sure there was every type of voting persuasion. Every kind of difference was there on that plane, but yet, if that plane went down, we were all in the same situation, weren't we? And it didn't matter if you were in first class or the back row of coach. I mean, we were all in the same situation. And so we were all in the same boat in a way. As different as we were, as strange as we were to one another, we were all in the same boat. Well, that's what happens here in this story. Jesus and his disciples are in a boat. Now, a storm comes up, and the winds are blowing so great, it says that the boat was being swamped by the waves. Now, like I said, I'm a Midwest guy, and that means I don't really have a whole lot of boating experience. I mean, I've been on a few canoe trips, been in a few fishing boats, things like that, but I don't know what it's like to be out in the middle at sea in the middle of a storm. I have zero experience with that. But just using my imagination, I'm guessing that it felt pretty helpless. I mean, you're out there and the waves are coming into the boat, and there's nothing that you can do to stop the waves at all. I mean, you just have to ride out the storm. Sort of like if you've had the experience of being in a car accident and you see another car coming at you, and you know that there's nothing that you can do to stop that car from hitting you. There's nothing that you can do to get out of the way. You feel helpless in that moment. You know something's going to happen, and you know that there's nothing that you can do about it. I mean, it had to feel that way for those disciples in the boat. I mean, here's the storm, and there's nothing that they can do about the storm. It's just coming and blowing in the water into the boat, and the boat is getting swamped. All of them, as different as all of those disciples were all in that boat together. I think there's so many situations in life that are like that, where we're all sort of in the same boat. I mean, this COVID pandemic has taught us this, hasn't it? I mean, we're all kind of in this boat together. Now I realize that some are able to deal with it in ways that others aren't, and some have better situations, and some people are in jobs where they've just lost them and they don't know what to do. I realize not every situation is the same, but yet it's a reality that all of us have had to deal with, all of us have had to face. We're all in the same boat together. You know what? Another way that we're all in the same boat? It's with climate change, with global warming. We all live on the same earth together. And so I think we're all in this boat together. 2019 was the warmest year on record. We've never seen a year that warm as 2019. And as the earth has felt the effects of climate change, we've seen so many things. Water supplies in some critical areas dwindle as snow and ice disappear. Sea levels rise, threatening coastal populations like that man that I met in the Philippines, but also, even in our own country, places like Florida, they're dealing with some difficult situations there. And the future, there are problems there as they face climate change. But not only coastal areas, but droughts and floods become more common. Hurricanes and other powerful storms increase in intensity. I heard one person explain it. It's that weather gets weirder as we deal with the effects of climate change, and we've all seen this as strange weather in a way. And adding that to the threat, the impacts of weather, there are also changes in agricultural production, the spread of disease. Now, if there's changes in agricultural production, all of us have to eat, and so that affects all of us. So this is all of us, isn't it? This is not just someone living in an island nation where we think, that's too bad. It's tempting, isn't it, for us to say, well, it's someone else, or it's just that guy in the Philippines having to deal with it. But no, I think we're all in this boat together. Now, as Jesus and his disciples are in the boat, and Jesus does something. Now, first, we've got to say he was asleep. Now, I think there's a whole sermon that could be preached upon that Jesus is human enough that he can sleep and tired enough that he can sleep in a boat through the storm. That's a whole nother sermon, I think. But his disciples wake him up. They say, Jesus, you got to do something here. And Jesus calms the storm. Literally, it says that he rebukes the wind and the sea. I would have liked to heard that. He gives the sea and the wind a talking to. He rebukes them. And then it says there's a dead calm. The problem is over. Now, I think it's easy for us to do in every situation, to do what the disciples do here with Jesus, saying, Jesus, you fix it. There are situations in life that are bigger than us, that are more challenging than our abilities, and where we don't know what to do. And the only thing that we can do is pray, Jesus, fix this thing. But I think it's easy sometimes when we have the ability to do something just to say, Jesus, take the wheel. You've probably heard that song, that country song from Carrie Underwood, I think it may be 15 years ago or so. And I realized why people like the song. The song describes this woman on the road, her kid in the back seat, and hits a patch of ice and the car's out of control. And the song describes that her bad situation and so many things that seem out of control in her life. And so she prays as her car is getting out of control. She prays, Jesus, take the wheel. I understand why people like that song. But whenever I've heard that song, I've always thought, well, yes, pray, but don't take your hands off the wheel here, lady. Turn into the skid, pump the brakes. You're not completely helpless here in this situation. Is Jesus up in heaven thinking, oh, I do this or that, but I got this crazy lady here takes her hands off the wheels and won't even help herself here? Does Jesus sometimes get a little frustrated at us for not handling the situations for which we can handle? I've learned this as a parent. There's so many things that I could do. But should I do all of those? Isn't it part of being a good parent is letting the child learn to do certain things and to take on certain situations? When we just ask Jesus to fix everything, does Jesus get a little frustrated, wondering, why couldn't we fix it? I'm wondering, here in this story, the disciples, they beg Jesus to do something. They say, Jesus, you got to do something. But I wonder if for us, if Jesus is begging us now, as we deal with the effects of climate change, if Jesus is the one begging us to do something. Here in the story, the disciples are saying, Jesus, you got to fix this. You got to change this situation. Is Jesus doing the same with us now? Is Jesus saying, why don't you do something? I believe as we face the effects of climate change, and I'm going to cough here, excuse me. as we face the effects of climate change, that there is a spiritual practice in responding to these needs. Now, you may be thinking, hey, Pastor, you only got a couple more sermons left here. You're going to spend it on this. Well, this is important because I think we're all in the same boat together. And this is a spiritual practice as we respond to the needs of climate change because we're loving our neighbor, whether that's that neighbor near or the neighbor far away, that neighbor in that island nation or that neighbor who's in agriculture dealing with a drought that they don't know how to respond to. We're loving our neighbor when we respond to these needs. And so there's things that I believe that we can do. The most important thing that we can do is speak up to our elected representatives. I believe it is a spiritual practice to reach out to elected representatives and ask them to do something that improves the welfare of the world around us. And I think in the end, the only significant change will come when governments respond in a significant way. And so it is a spiritual practice for us to reach out to our elected representatives and say, we need to do something. But beyond that, there's things that you can do. Power your home with renewable energy, if it's possible. Weatherize your home. And that not only saves you a few bucks on your energy bill, but it helps the needs around us. Invest in energy efficient appliances, reduce water waste, actually eat the food that you buy, make less of it meat. I realize not everybody likes me saying that, but that's a way that we can improve the fortunes of this world. Buy better light bulbs. I mean, there's lots of little things that we can do. And so, yes, just you or me doing it, I mean, what difference does that make? But when enough of us start doing it, a difference is made. These are spiritual practices. These are things that we do as we act out our faith. These are not just nuts and bolts things that are worldly things and, with the church to save souls. No, we care about the world that God has given us. But as we do, we have Jesus' peace. I love that image of after Jesus calms the storm, that there is a dead calm, it says. It's just, the sea is completely calm. And I believe we carry that calmness in our hearts as Jesus people. When we know and love Jesus, we have the calmness that comes from him. And so as we deal with these things, as significant and as challenging and as hard as they are, I believe we carry that calmness within us. We are all in the same boat together. This is the one world that we have. So that means that we live and are part of this world all together. We are in the same boat together. And so that means that we have to do something about the needs of this world. We can't ignore them. We can't act like they're somewhere else. We can't just say, Jesus, take the wheel, you do it, and we'll just worry about other things. No. We have to do something. And we do it, if not for yourself, we do it for our children, for our grandchildren, for their children and grandchildren too, because it's the right thing to do, not only for ourselves, but for them too. God has given us this one boat, which we're all in together. Let's take care of it and do the right thing. Amen.